If you've ever watched a lab day slowly unravel in real time, students grabbing materials before you finish instructions, half the class standing around waiting, the other half already 3 steps ahead, that's not a student problem, that's a routine problem. And today we're going to fix it.
Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Kristen Masick, a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive but thrive as a multiple prep teacher.
This is the final episode in our 4-part series on classroom routines and procedures. We've covered classroom management routines, student accountability procedures, and today we're closing out with the category that CTE teachers, elective teachers, science teachers, and honestly, anyone with students touching devices, equipment, and materials need most: technology and lab procedures. And if you're on my email list, pull out the example that I sent because we're going to reference it today. If you're not on my list, no worries. I'll tell you where to get the full planner at the end. For the last few years I was in the classroom, I had access to a laptop cart. And that created its own set of problems because students make assumptions. Some days they'd walk in and immediately grab a laptop, except we weren't using them that day. Other days, nobody would grab them, and then I'd realize we needed software updates, students needed to log in, or a website was acting up. And suddenly, 15 or 20 minutes of instructional time was gone before we'd even started. Eventually, I realized this wasn't a technology problem, it was a routine problem. Students didn't know what kind of day they were walking into, and when students don't know, they guess. Usually not the way you'd prefer. But the moment that really made this click for me was a simulation I ran in my engineering class. We were doing a paper airplane factory simulating push and pull in manufacturing. Students had roles, there was a process. On paper, it made sense, but in practice, it was loose. I hadn't clearly assigned who was doing what. The roles existed, but nobody knew exactly where they fit in the sequence. And so the room got noisy, the process got muddy, and when we tried to run the simulation, it didn't demonstrate what I needed it to demonstrate. Not because students were being difficult, because nobody knew their place in the system. And here's what I know now that I didn't know then. The structured A/B pairing system that I used in my example that I'll talk about a little bit more, consistent groups, permanent designations, rotating roles, that didn't come to me while I was teaching. It came later from watching a lot of classrooms, especially elementary classrooms, because elementary teachers are exceptionally good at this. They are explicit about partners, about pairings, about roles. Students know their partner A or partner B, and they usually call it something really cute. Secondary, maybe not so cute. They know what that means. They know what they're responsible for. And here's why that matters for the paper airplane story. If my students had already been working inside that kind of structure all year, if they were used to knowing their designation, their role, their place in the group, then when I introduced that simulation, they would have had a framework to slot into. The chaos wasn't inevitable. It was the result of asking students to navigate a complex activity without the structural foundation to support it. Had I built the routine earlier and built it consistently, the simulation might have actually worked the way I had intended. Here's the thing about technology and lab days. They ask students to make more decisions than a typical class period. Do I grab a device? Where do I sit? Who is my partner? What's my role? Where are the supplies? What do I do when I'm finished? How do I clean up? And if we haven't intentionally answered those questions for students, they'll answer them themselves. Usually not in the way we'd prefer. This category of routines isn't really about devices or equipment. It's about reducing ambiguity. Because when students know what kind of day they're walking into, when the structure is already familiar, they can spend their energy on the learning instead of the logistics. And you spend less time repeating yourself. Here are 3 classroom technology procedures every secondary teacher should think through before school starts. 1. Using computers, Chromebooks, iPads. How do students know they're needed today? Do they grab them when they walk in, wait for a signal, or check the board? How do they return them? Charge them, report issues. A simple visual signal, a slide on the board, a color card, a post-it notice can eliminate the assumption problem entirely. 2. Lab day procedures. This is a big one. How are groups assigned? Do students have roles? Who gathers materials? Who cleans up? How do students know when it's time to stop building and start reflecting? This is the one we're going to focus on this episode, so we are going to go deep on this one in a minute. 3. Using new tools and equipment. Do students watch a demonstration first? Is there a safety progression before independent use? Do they earn access to certain tools? Because honestly, a lot of what looks like behavior problems during tool use disappears when students know exactly how equipment is supposed to be handled. Okay, if you have that example from your email, pull it out now because I want to walk you through the lab day routine specifically, and there are details in here that I think are worth saying out loud. Each page of the routines and procedures planner has some questions up at the top, so I answered all of those questions, and then this is what I came up with based on my lab procedure. So the first thing that I needed to fill in was what the routine looks like for students. So before group assignments are ever revealed, before anyone knows who they're working with, the class reviews a brief lab-specific slide. That slide highlights anything unique about today's activity, a special material, a safety reminder, a different sequence than usual. Students read and listen before groups are announced. That one step prevents the movement and side conversations that happen the moment students find out who they're sitting with. Then, and only then, group assignments are displayed. And here's the part I want you to really hear. Groups are consistent. Students have permanent A and B designations. Those pairings can combine into groups of 4 with C and D roles added, but the core designation stays fixed. Now, if you have the example in front of you, you'll see that there's also different pairings. So there could be a yellow, a red, a blue, or a green pairing, just in case you are doing different activities or different labs where you're having different sets of students paired together, but then you will always have them still have that A and B just to make it easier so that they don't have to think, oh, I'm with my yellow partner today, now I'm B. That just is confusing. Students don't have to relearn where they belong every single lab day. That consistency is the whole point. Before touching any materials, students follow the standard lab startup sequence. They confirm the workspace is clean, read the instructions, take inventory of supplies. The materials person collects what needs to be collected from the back table. Roll cards with images are posted on the board, visual cues so that students can reference their role throughout the lab without needing you to remind them. At the end of class, students reset the workspace and return all materials before dismissal. Incomplete projects go on the designated shelf, labeled with class period and group number. And in my example, I even suggest that you could take a picture of the fully reset workspace, what it looks like, and display that on the board at cleanup time so students know exactly what they're aiming for without you having to describe it. So this is what the routine looks like for the teacher. Before class, 2 slides prepared, roll cards posted, back table set up with materials organized and ready. During the lab, you circulate, you monitor group dynamics, you track role rotation so no student is always the scribe or always the builder. And here's the line from the example that I think is one of the most useful things in this entire series. If one group is off task, use proximity, move toward them. That's usually enough. But if multiple groups are off task, that's a behavior problem. That's a signal that instructions weren't clear. Pause. Do some just-in-time teaching. Restate the expectation, model the step, then continue. Whole class redirection should be the exception, not the default. How to teach it. First lab day of the year, full I do. Walk through every single step out loud, review the lab slide, reveal groups, model the startup sequence, assign roles, demonstrate what a reset workspace looks like. Do a simple low-stakes lab that first time, something easy enough that students can focus on the routine instead of the content. Second lab day, you do with narration. You're still circulating and talking students through it. By the third lab, the routine should be starting to carry itself. Roll cards and the board display do most of the work after that. And plan to revisit it after an extended break, a substitute day, or when a new student joins mid-semester. I want to come back to that paper airplane factory for a second because I've thought about that lesson a lot over the years. Not with embarrassment, but with clarity. the simulation wasn't a bad idea. The concept was solid. The roles made sense on paper. What was missing was the structural foundation that would have made it work. If my students had been operating inside a consistent A-B grouping system all year, if they already knew their designation, their role, their place, then dropping them into a complex simulation would have been much smaller ask. The structure would have carried the weight. Instead, I was asking them to navigate the content and figure out the structure at the same time. That's too much. And that's a lesson I want you to take away from this series. Structure isn't what gets in the way of good learning. Structure is what makes good learning possible. The paper airplane factory could have worked. It just needed a routine underneath it. At the start of the series, I talked about realizing that teacher prep prepared me to teach content, but didn't prepare me to build systems. And my hope is that after these 4 episodes, you're looking at your classroom a little differently, not just as a place where learning happens, but as a system, one that can support your students and one that can support you. Because the classrooms that feel calm, the ones that seem to run on autopilot, aren't running on personality. They're running on intentionally designed routines that somebody took the time to build and teach. That somebody can be you before August. Today, I walked you through one of the 12 routines inside the Routines and Procedures Planner. The planner gives you a set of questions for each routine so that you can develop what that would look like for students in your classroom, what it looks like for you, what happens when students don't follow it, and how you're going to teach it for all 12 routines across all 3 categories. It's included in the Secondary Teacher Systems Toolkit, 9 ready-to-use resources designed to help secondary teachers build systems that save time, reduce decision fatigue, and make classrooms run more smoothly before the school year even starts. Link is in the show notes. Before you go, one question: if your students walked into your classroom tomorrow, pretending that we're in school, and you weren't allowed to answer a single question, would they still know what to do? If the answer is no, you found your next routine to build. Finish something that makes tomorrow lighter. See you next time.